Hello and welcome to our Southgate Estates question and answer sessions.
One of the first questions our clients often ask is,
how much should you pay for estate agency fees? So Jonathan, is there a reason not to just go for the cheapest agent?
absolutely, it's like everything in life. You get what you pay for. If you go with a cheap agent, you're not going to get the full service. You're going to end up doing a lot of the work yourself. Plus everything will look a little bit shoddy, and if it looks shoddy then you'll probably not get the right interest in the property and it won't sell for the right price. So it's a real false economy. If you might save £1,000 on your agency fees, you're probably going to lose £5,000 or £10,000 on what you end up with.
And how much does a typical agent usually charge?
Well, historically, agent fees have always been between 1.5% to 2% plus VAT of the final sale price of the house. And that's a model that's developed over many years, and it is a model that has worked in the past. At the moment, agent fees are slightly below that. I'm hearing most agent fees are between 1 and 1.25% at the moment. So anywhere between 1 and 1.25% plus VAT. Agents now quote including VAT, so 1.5% including VAT is a very, very normal fee.
Okay. And how do you propose to come up with a realistic cost?
I'm going to work it through. I'm going to choose a typical example. In this instance, we're going to take a 3-bedroom house and we're going to say, well, a typical 3-bedroom house would have about 13 or 14 viewings on it. A lot of guesswork involved, and then we're going to work out on an hourly basis like you would do in any other industry. If you were having your washing machine serviced or your car repaired or your hair cut or your garden worked on, you'd have an hourly rate that you expect to pay people. And in this example, I'm going to go for £25 an hour. That's a lot less than you'd pay for a lot of those things I've just mentioned. Perhaps it's similar to gardening. And it's an enormous amount less than things like the legal profession, where it would be £200 or £300 per hour. And we're going to work out through the whole process how many hours go into the transaction. Again, so much guesswork, and at the end of it we'll come up with a figure, and then we'll translate that back into a percentage fee. One thing I will say is that agents always work on the percentage fee basis, so that actually works really well. What we tend to find is the bigger the house, the more time everything takes. The photos will take longer, the brochure will take longer to write, the viewings take longer, it'll be further away, so you're travelling further. It's amazingly accurate actually when you're in the industry. So
where would you start?
The first step in the transaction is the valuation. So this is where we go out to look at the house. I'm going to say for this, we book it in and prepare the valuation in the office. So we do lots of comparables before we go. We look at what the neighbours have sold for. An hour to do that. Typically I spend about an hour in the valuation normally. I'm going to put 30 minutes travel time on, 15 minutes each way, and then around about 30 minutes because I've got to write a follow-up letter afterwards and maybe call the vendor just to say what my final thoughts are. So 3 hours to do a valuation, but don't forget, for every fee that an agent takes, we would normally do 4 valuations. You're probably going to have 4 valuations on your property. Some people have 1 or 2, some people have 10 or 11. It's not uncommon to get 10 valuations booked in on a single property. So I'm rating on 4, and that means 12 hours goes into the valuations for every fee that we take.
So the valuation's done, the client's presumably chosen their agent. I suppose the next step is photos?
Yeah, it's what we call the take on. This is where the agent visits the property, takes the photographs, measures up for the floor plan, takes the video, writes the description. And I'm going to run through this very quickly. So 30 minutes in the office to book it into the system, to put all the match criteria onto the computer. 30 minutes to travel again. I'm going to say 15 minutes each way as a typical journey. The agent then spends around about 3 hours at the property itself, taking the photographs, measuring up, writing some notes. Back to the office, and I think it takes round about 8 hours to do all the editing of the photographs, writing the brochure, putting everything together, editing the video. There's lots to do. Another hour then just to sort out the match criteria and get it ready to send out to people, get the brochure printed. And then we're going to add a little bit of time on, a couple of hours to do the admin, things like the anti-money laundering checks, to do the property questionnaire. We have to ask lots of questions now, all about the title and when the boiler was serviced, all sorts of really important stuff. So another couple of hours. So yeah, that's quite a big task on its own.
So that's about 27 hours, and we're just getting to the market.
Yes, that's right.
So we're on the market now. What happens next?
This is where all the activity starts. This is where the client starts to see things happening. So the first thing we will do if we're doing our job properly is we'll be in the office, we'll pick the phone up and we will call potential clients. We've got a new property come on the market, do you want to have a look at it? Very straightforward, but again, if you go with the cheaper agent, this is the sort of thing that will get missed out. And I'm going to say about 3 hours to do that. And then of course we've got the viewings, and this is where the guesswork really comes in. How many viewings are we going to do? Well, as I said earlier, we can have a massive range. I'm going to say a typical number on a typical house is around about 13. If we work on the basis of 13 viewings, around about an hour and a half each. By the time you've done the viewing, you've driven there, you've driven back, you've spent a little bit of time booking it in, negotiating a time for the viewing with the applicant and the vendor, and you've done some feedback, 1.5 hours per viewing, I think, so around 20 hours for the viewing. So again, ideally at this point we are then looking to get some offers on the property, and I think we're now up to around about 50 hours altogether.
What about other costs?
Yeah, of course there are costs associated with it. We have some printing done, we travel to and from the property, so we've got to put a bit of travel costs on there. And of course we're advertising on the portals. This is Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market. They will charge us on a monthly basis. I'm going to say that a typical estate agent will spend about £400 per property on the portals. Let's say another £100 for the printing the brochures, putting the board up, printing, all that sort of stuff, and fuel. So let's say £500 is a fairly round figure for what we think the actual costs are to the agent.
So you've had the viewings, and what happens next?
Again, there's more guesswork here. We're going to be taking the offers, hopefully. You've had all your viewings. Next stage is people will ring up, place an offer, and we do our negotiating. And again, in terms of how long we spend on this, I'm thinking that on a typical property we probably spend around half a day, so let's say 4 hours negotiating the sale. It can take 2 or 3 days if we've got lots of bidders. It can be really complicated, or it can just take a few minutes, but 4 hours is very typical. And we're going to add another hour on for doing the anti-money laundering and the due diligence on the buyer. We need to see their mortgage offer and where their finance is coming from, and a few bits and pieces. So 5 hours to tie the sale up.
So you've reached an agreement, but that's not where it stops, is it?
No, it isn't. This is where the hard work really starts for a good agent, and this is where you'll see the biggest difference between the cheap agent and the more professional agents. The after sales side of the business can be very, very different. I think in our agency, if you look at how many hours are booked by the after sales team and how many transactions go through in a month, we are looking at around about 15 hours for every property that completes goes into the after sales side of the transaction. So that's another 15 hours to add on.
So adding up, we're up to about 70 hours of work and £500 of costs. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, if you work that out, it works out to £2,250. But don't forget, we also have to take into account that not every transaction will complete. So we will find around about, I'm looking at a national figure here of about 25% will fall through along the way. It can be a number of reasons, but let's take that into account as well, because we need to charge a margin to allow for the ones that never pay a penny. And that brings us to £2,812 as the baseline cost to the estate agency for providing that service.
And is there anything else we need to take into account?
I'm afraid there is a little something. Like any business is going to want to make a small profit. and I'm going to add a small profit margin. Obviously the directors and shareholders will need to be paid, and there'll be overheads to pay for, so there has to be a profit margin in order to operate. I'm going to suggest an estate agent at the moment should be operating on somewhere around 15% because the market is particularly squeezed. And that takes our figure to 3,234. So the whole package cost therefore is £3,234.
So what is the answer?
So if we work this backwards now, we start off with our £3,234. We were looking at the average house, 3-bedroom house in our area. In this particular area, and this will vary across the country, in this area we're looking at around about £300,000 for the house. If we take our fee of £3,234, divide it by £300,000, our fee is just under 1.1%, and I think that is the answer. If you are paying less than 1.1%, and I will say that these figures are worked out without the VAT, so your agent should be quoting including VAT, so your minimum fee you should be paying to get the full service, to get looked after properly by your estate agent, is 1.1% plus VAT. And you might like to pay a little bit more because you want the agent to really work hard for you. So my advice is pay somewhere between 1.1 plus VAT and about 1.4, 1.5 plus VAT, and your agent should bust a gut to get you the best price possible for your house. If you pay less, you'll get fall throughs, you'll get a lot of stress, and you'll probably get £5,000 or £10,000 less for your property than you would have done if you went with a full service. This whole situation is summed up quite well by John Ruskin. I'm going to leave you with the following quote to take a look at. And I think this goes for so much in business. If you're not paying enough, it probably won't do what you want to do. So, and I think that goes with the estate agency very, very much indeed.